Hello there. Good morning and welcome to Rising. So glad you decided to watch our lovely show on this beautiful Wednesday day in the nation's capital.
It is always a delight to be here with you, Robby, and plenty to discuss as we always do. So let's get started. What is on your radar?
Happy to tell you, Niall. Here's a poll result that definitely surprised some people. According to the latest from Emerson College, 41% of young people, that is respondents between the ages of 18 and 29, find the killing of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson to be acceptable, either somewhat acceptable or completely acceptable. Now, these findings were at odds with respondents overall. 68% of people from all age groups said that the actions allegedly taken by accused killer Luigi Mangione were unacceptable. And look, I understand why many Americans are frustrated with the healthcare system. I'm frustrated as well. These frustrations are not partisan. Democrats and Republicans and independents alike all understand that the cost of the medical care in the United States is just crazy relative to the benefits we are getting. Now, we disagree on the solutions. We disagree, for instance, on whether getting the government more involved would bring down costs or actually just make the problem worse. But the impulse to dislike how bureaucrats and middle managers, both from the private sphere and the public sphere, have saddled people with out-of-control medical costs is perfectly normal. That does not mean, however, that it's acceptable to kill the CEO of a healthcare company. It's not acceptable to kill any CEO or any political figure or anyone at all except in self-defense. That's why there is no comparison, despite what some on MSNBC are saying, no comparison between Luigi Mangione, who allegedly gunned down Thompson, and Daniel Penny, who defended his actions on grounds that placing Jordan Neely in a chokehold was preventing violence and harm. Now, many liberals have argued that Penny's actions went beyond merely behaving in the defense of others. The jury ultimately disagreed with that. But in contrast, no one could argue that Mangione's alleged murder of Thompson was acting in anyone's self-defense. The murder will not change the policies of the healthcare company. Thompson will be replaced by someone who does the same job. Americans should advocate for better, more compassionate, more affordable healthcare coverage and reforms to the system. But we should never, ever find ourselves condoning cold-blooded murder. That impulse is to be condemned. Yet far from being condemned, the impulse is being celebrated by some people who've gone so far as to donate to Mangione's legal defense. Here's what his lawyer said about that during a recent interview on CNN.
I have received some emails. I have not seen them personally, but my understanding from my staff is people are doing that.
That people are reaching out to you and offering to help pay for his legal bills.
That's correct.
Would you accept those offers? I mean, I imagine you maybe have, I don't know, have you ever gotten that before?
Nah, to be honest with you, I probably wouldn't.
Why do you think you would not accept that?
I don't know. I just I don't know. I just don't feel comfortable about that. So I don't know. I haven't given that much thought, but I'm not looking, obviously my client appreciates the support that he has, but I don't know. I just, I'd have to look in, but it just doesn't sit right with me, really.
Why do you think they're offering?
I don't know. People, you talk about, the Supreme Court says, all these rich billionaires can give all kind of money to candidates, and that's free speech. So maybe these people are exercising their right to free speech and saying that's the way they're supporting my client.
Look, that was not a bad point. He's certainly not wrong to note that people have the right to do exactly what they're doing, to give money to Luigi Mangione. Now, the latest news is that Luigi Mangione is being charged not merely with murder, but also with terrorism. Prosecutors argued that he, quote, intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population and to, quote, affect the conduct of a unit of government by murder. Widespread sympathy for Mangione among young people is no doubt influencing the prosecutor's decision here. And while I absolutely agree that Mangione should be brought to justice for his alleged crimes, but in terms of also having due process, of course, the terrorism label sticks out to me, as it frequently does, as confusing. As independent journalist Michael Tracy argues, prosecutors have been pointlessly empowered with a huge array of purposely vague terrorism statutes as though they wouldn't otherwise be able to criminalize murder. I agree. terrorism has become an all too slippery term that forces us to try to judge whether one killing is more heinous than another, whether violence is being utilized as part of a coherent strategy or political ideology, or whether it's the result of mental illness or personal vendetta, when it's myriad things. Mangione is an accused murderer. He deserves due process. He should get his day in court. No one should idolize him or the actions that he took, and a society that celebrates this kind of thing is rotten to its core. We also do not need to pretend that every crime, every act of violence should have us on high alert for terroristic plots or should make us more inclined to give up our precious civil liberties, which the government has already seen too much of that happening. The government has the tools they need to exact justice in this case.
A lot of ground covered there, Robbie, a lot of different components to this case and components to the public reaction to it. I think the point where we probably disagree or diverge, at least, isn't I'm not endorsing Thompson's killing. I don't think it is a good idea for people to walk around murdering other people. I think I maybe I'm more sympathetic to the public anger about health insurance companies and the way that they conduct their business, and the idea that it is often just very callous, very greedy, very manipulative, and also that they try to wriggle out of the obligations that their product should impose upon them. They're essentially, selling very expensive buckets with the holes in the bottom when it comes to actually claims. Now, again, that does not justify the murder of Brian Thompson. We'll see Luigi Mangione, we think, is going to plead not guilty. He'll have his day in court. The point, though, that I think we've perhaps most common ground on is the terrorism thing, which does seem a very peculiar definition of this case to me. I think most of us think of terrorism either in a sort of, as a broader cause than simply, I have a vendetta against a certain person in business or a certain type of person in business, and much more about armed groups taking action of one kind or another. And there are obviously dangers to civil liberties in the expansion of anti-terrorism powers, or in the expansion of the definition of terrorism to include things like this.
Certainly, and this goes to points I make about hate crimes, because then we have to understand, we have to know exactly why he did this, and then that makes it much, much worse if it's for this reason but not this reason. That always does not quite sit right with me. The result is the same. A man was gunned down on the street, and that is wrong and he should be convicted of it if he's guilty and if the evidence is compelling. And then whether his motive, what was his state of mind as he was doing it? Is it because he's just crazy, or is it a personal vendetta against the healthcare system? Is that part of an ideology? If the manifesto was longer and more elaborate, that suddenly makes it part of a coherent, view of how social change is supposed to work. It just seems so strange to me to bother obsessing it over that much. I think the human brain hungers for explanation, and when sometimes violence is a little bit inexplicable, and you can't, and healthy, well-adjusted people don't usually do this kind of thing, and so you're trying to understand something that is intrinsically, that lacks the kind of carefully thought out, these dominoes fell and then I ended up like this.
And the other point I think there is, on the topic of sort of civil liberties in general, the idea that these kind of attitudes are defined as terrorism. Yesterday on Rising, we had Ken Klippenstein on talking about both the idea of there being a hotline specifically for business executives, which doesn't sit right with me, but he also mentioned in passing this case in Florida where a woman was arrested for making threats in a phone call, I believe, toward health insurance industry people. Do we really want to be defining that as terrorism? I'm not saying you should call people up and threaten them, but is every threat that has, in the absolutely broadest sense, some political component to it, terrorism? I'm pretty leery of going down that road.
Yeah, indeed. Myself as well. Well, we're just getting started on Rising today. Please stick around. We'll be back right after this. Liz Cheney could be in some trouble. Republican Barry Loudermilk of Georgia released a report by the House Subcommittee on Oversight on Tuesday. It recommends the FBI criminally investigate Liz Cheney. The report alleges that Cheney broke several laws, including engaging in witness tampering during her time on the January 6th investigative committee.
The subcommittee claims Cheney interfered with Cassidy Hutchinson's relationship with her lawyer, Stefan Passantino. The committee is pointing to signal messages that it released in October that show Hutchinson and Cheney in contact with each other. The subcommittee is arguing that Cheney communicating behind Passantino's back with Hutchinson constitutes witness tampering.
Passantino was accused of coaching Hutchinson into saying that she remembered little of what happened on January 6th, and that maybe she'd get a job in Trump world as a result. Hutchinson ultimately got rid of Passantino. Now, when Hutchinson reached out to Cheney, she wrote, quote, "Hi, this is Cassidy Hutchinson. I'm sorry for reaching out this way, but I was hoping to have a private conversation with you soon, if you're willing," end quote. Cheney responded by writing, quote, "I would be happy to."
Cheney spoke out on Blue Sky about Republican calls for her prosecution. She defended the January the 6th committee's work and blasted President Trump for his behavior on January the 6th. She continued by writing in part, "Chairman Loudermilk's interim report intentionally disregards the truth and the Select Committee's tremendous weight of evidence, and instead fabricates lies and defamatory allegations in an attempt to cover up what Donald Trump did."
Republicans took to X to share their support. Congressman Jim Banks of Indiana wrote, "Liz Cheney abused her power and should be held accountable." Lara Trump told conservative podcaster Benny Johnson that people who break the law do deserve jail time. Here she is.
Everything that has happened with this January 6th nonsense, anyone who did anything illegal ought to be held accountable. And I'm not a legal expert or a legal scholar, but I do know that when you break the law, that means you go to jail and you serve time.
Bernie Sanders on NBC News' Meet the Press Sunday said that Biden might want to consider pardoning January the 6th committee members preemptively.
In light of what the president-elect said to me, that yes, he does think that members of the January 6th committee should go to jail, do you think that Mr. Biden should issue preemptive pardons for the entire January 6th committee?
Well, I think he might want to consider that very seriously. Look, that is an outrageous statement. This is what authoritarianism is all about. It's what dictatorship is all about. You do not arrest elected officials who disagree with you, who undertake an investigation.
President-elect Donald Trump also piled on Truth Social. He referenced Newsmax's Greg Kelly, who claimed Cheney could be in a lot of trouble because she likely broke numerous federal laws. Look, I don't, as with the January 6th hearings themselves, I didn't know that endlessly relitigating this day is the most fantastic or important or necessary thing to do. I would similarly think relitigating how it was relitigated is also not the most important item on Republicans' agenda. We should be forward-thinking and looking to solve the problems that the American people elected Donald Trump to solve. Liz Cheney has lost in every sense politically. Her faction could not be more out of favor with the Republicans. In fact, her faction is now part of the Democratic Party, if anywhere. So that's all fine. But look, I cannot judge at all from my position, not having looked at it closely enough or not having expertise here. I cannot at all judge whether she has done something that is criminally wrong. It certainly is not outside the realm of total possibility that she interacted with some witness in some way that is legally problematic. Could not concede that? If she did in fact break that law, it's not sacred that she not be investigated for. Now, I don't think she should be unfairly investigated. I have no idea, no way to tell. But it's not impossible that there's a grounds to investigate something there.
Yeah, I'll come to that in a second. But first of all, I really can't let Lara Trump go unanswered, making the argument which. I believe in the argument in principle that everyone should be accountable for their actions. It's, does she believe that about her father-in-law? Right. There's no evidence at all that she believes that. In his case, there were 4 criminal cases against him. The one that went to trial in which he was convicted, his team are trying to undo in various ways. So I find it honestly laughable that she tries to cloak herself in this idea that everybody should be accountable for their deeds when that is not reflected in her other beliefs about her own father-in-law. Now, in relation to Liz Cheney, yes, I agree that it is not sacred that Liz Cheney should never, ever be. I have no great love for Liz Cheney. I don't think that the case that the Republicans are making here is very strong. The argument...
You mean that the Democrats are making?
No, the Republicans are making against Liz Cheney.
For prosecution.
Yeah, sure. The argument that Republicans are making that she was involved in witness tampering, I don't find strong because I read the report this morning on the relevant sections allegations are about the idea that Cassidy Hutchinson reached out to Cheney. Cheney at one point did say, well, I'm not sure if I can ethically talk to you because you have a lawyer. That lawyer at that time was a person who was getting his legal fees paid by now President-elect Trump's Political Action Committee. So he was essentially a Trump lawyer. And Cheney or Cheney's staff eventually sent Cassidy Hutchinson a list of potential lawyers who she could consult with if she wanted. I think it's a very big stretch to say that that rises to the level of witness tampering, a charge that is typically made more whenever people are coaching witnesses or suggesting that witnesses should say things that are untrue. So I don't find it a very strong charge. I have no great love for Liz Cheney, but I do disagree with you in terms of the January the 6th committee. I think that day was easily the bleakest day that I have seen in covering American politics, and I think its aberrational nature does merit proper investigation.
I mean, I don't want to ever be on the record as trying to downplay it being bad. I was there. I covered it in person. I lived near the Capitol. I went down. I watched it happen. I watched them smash windows and go in, etc. I got tear gassed in the face because there's no way to duck out of the path of an incoming tear gas cloud. It was. I've described it as an embarrassing spectacle. Now, do I think in the scheme of all of the violence and looting and property destruction I witnessed in Washington D.C. over the course of the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter stuff and all of that, do I think it was like so shocking to the conscience necessarily? No, not quite.
But it was about trying to overturn an election. Surely that makes a difference, does it not? I mean, it would undo a bedrock of American democracy.
I don't agree that they had a coherent plan to actually overturn the election.
Well, that was the aim.
The legal stuff going on.
The aim was to keep Donald Trump in power. Would you agree with that?
I think the aim was to smash some windows and parade around and wreck the Capitol.
For the fun of it?
They succeeded at doing. No, because they were angry and they thought, and Donald Trump had contributed to them thinking they won the election. But I think it's a stretch to say this was like an attack on America, and we were this close to having political leaders taken hostage, and that was going to be the end of.
I don't think it's a stretch at all. It was an attempt by a mob to thwart the legitimate outcome of an election.
I think it was a angry. I mean, 99% of the people there engaged in First Amendment protected activity, that you can disagree with their cause. I don't agree with their cause, but didn't do anything wrong. A small number of people smashed the windows, walked in, fought with police. They've all been charged, as they should be. It's fine with that to me. I think it's been exaggerated how much of a threat to our entire way of government it was. It's been described by. You think it's on the level of Pearl Harbor?
No, Robby,
like
I don't think it's on the level of Pearl Harbor, but I think a democracy or republic rests upon the acceptance of legitimate election results. And if you cede that right to the people who can create the most trouble, then you cease to have a democracy.
But then I run into the problem that accepting the election result, I mean, Hillary Clinton and John Kerry and everybody have always said, oh, it was unfair, Russia made it illegitimate. I mean, the rhetoric around the 2016 election from mainstream liberal media pundits on it being illegitimate because of some Facebook ads on Russia was
not raise a rabble to invade the United States.
Not specifically in that time, but they raised a rabble to smash the windows of every building in this city when they were rioting over George Floyd or anything else. I watched them trash that church near Lafayette Square. I watched them do that. I mean, I find this sort of behavior gross, by the way, and I throw the book at all these people who did this. Property destruction is not at all acceptable to me. It's just it has been a mark of a small number of far right and far left people over the last several years, probably due to some underlying frustrations in the pandemic.
But one was backed by a person who was then the sitting president of the United States.
Well, the Republicans, Trump people would say that he did not at all tell them to do that. He told them to peacefully protest, show strength, but peacefully protest. They will say that he did not call on them to do this. Now, for my own opinion, I think that you can absolutely make the case that he failed to cool tensions, and he should have done that, and you can hold him morally responsible for what happened. I don't think he planned to cause this to happen,
I think
or is
there has
legally
been,
culpable
I
for
think
what
there has
happened.
been a Republican and conservative media-led effort to play down January the 6th in order to try to get Donald Trump off the hook upon which his own conduct and words put him.
Yeah, I mean, the ultimate judge of his conduct here was the election, which he won. So
Yes, and therefore thwarted his own trial on criminal charges.
all right. Well, good debate. Tell us what you think. Lots more to come today. Stay tuned. More Rising right after this.
So much for Democrats leaning into the next generation. AOC was lobbying to become the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, and her opponent was Congressman Gerry Connolly, who's about twice her age. But in the end, Connolly defeated Ocasio-Cortez by 131 votes to 84.
The roll came open after current Oversight ranking member Jamie Raskin opted to run for the top Democratic spot on the Judiciary Committee instead. Connolly, who is 74, argued that the idea there was generational change afoot within the Democratic caucus was a, quote, false narrative, that he and his colleagues were, quote, looking at capability, that we are not looking at age.
He had the backing of several veteran lawmakers, including the not-to-be-trifled-with former Speaker Nancy Pelosi. What is more stunning is that Connolly recently revealed he has a form of cancer which will require aggressive treatment. In response to her loss, AOC posted on Blue Sky, "Tried my best. Sorry I couldn't pull it through, everyone. We live to fight another day."
Connolly, for his part, posted on X yesterday, "I thank my colleagues for their support and the confidence they've placed in me to lead House Democrats on the Oversight Committee." So this is probably a unfortunate blow for supporters of AOC, of which there are many. She is very popular among progressives and still some on the left, although I know others on the left are disappointed with her seeming pivot, not exactly to the center, but to try to play nicer with the establishment in hopes, I think, of winning a position just like this one. But sorry, generational change, you're going to have to wait on that.
And by quite a large margin as well. I mean, almost 50 vote margin that she lost by, which I was quite surprised by.
You thought it was going to be closer?
I thought it was going to be closer. I didn't necessarily think she was going to win, and Gerry Connolly had previously got the approval of the steering committee, which is important, and then it went to the full vote. But I thought it was going to be closer for a couple of reasons. One is, I think, the generational change argument is definitely out there, and not only on Capitol Hill or not only in the Democratic Party. If we look at the results of the recent election, obviously Donald Trump made some inroads with younger voters. The Democratic advantage there diminishing. I would think it would be to Dems' advantage to have younger faces. The other thing is AOC is a very effective communicator. I understand that a lot of people who are politically opposed to her loathe her, and she inspires fervent disagreement among that cohort. But, I mean, she is beloved among the people who are fans of hers. I would argue she's a more effective communicator than the other squad members, which is why, you know, she's AOC and they aren't. And on a committee as important as this, or as maybe prominent as this, it seems to me there was a good political argument to be made for someone who is a potent communicator at its head. Didn't work, though.
I think she comes across, you know, I don't agree with her at all, but I think she comes across as genuine. I remember her asking her voters why they selected Trump and her, how, you know, what, trying to actually understand from a sincere, what is it about Trump that you see as fitting, you know, you support my views, what I'm trying to do for working people, and you think that's Trump too, and can you explain that? So I think she has a better understanding on some level of where the Democratic Party is headed. Now, at the same time, just, you know, changing the Democratic Party to give what young people everything they want would not necessarily be a winning strategy. The party needs to appeal to working class people, to minorities it's losing, probably on the grounds of like economic populism, which fits in with AOC, but then also the perception that they're, you know, too woke or culturally liberal, or just the faculty of Harvard or whatever is the whole party, is that's a bad influence, and that's also prominent among young people.
To knit together that point about wokeness and the point about AOC seeming to position herself at least as less of an outsider, there was, as you probably know, a mini controversy about, I think it was X rather than blue sky, her bio, she removed the pronouns from it.
Yes.
And she argued that it was something to do with character limits, which was an explanation that a lot of people were skeptical of, because it was seen, I think, as her moving away, or at least being open to move away from the ultra woke identity stuff. Now, she's still of the left, clearly. There is an argument in this committee rule that some Democrats didn't want someone who is such a lightning rod for conservative criticism at its head. I mean, if I had a vote, I would have headed in the other direction, but I understand why there is a reason, why that rationale exists.
Yeah, it's not like she's a lightning rod, excuse me, for criticism any more than like Nancy Pelosi herself, and in fact, less so than Nancy Pelosi herself, who was in charge of the Democratic caucus for however many years, and still seems to hold something of a grudge against AOC, exercising her still significant behind-the-scenes powers to tank this.
Yeah, and it seemed like AOC's chances declined from roughly the point that Pelosi got involved. I'm not saying that it would have been a completely different outcome, but the general shift away from AOC and toward the much more, I think he calls himself seasoned Jerry Conway, is definitely, you know, in keeping with Pelosi's views on this.
And then just in terms of the age thing, I mean, you mentioned in your read that he has cancer, he's going to have an operation. Of course, wish him all the best, and that's it. I'm sure it will be a successful operation, a successful recovery, but at a time where, you know, we've just talked a lot about how Democratic leadership, some Republican leadership as well, it's not necessarily a partisan thing, but it's certainly holding the Democrats back more in this recent election cycle, having leadership that is so old and seen as incapable, and in some cases literally incapable, when we get to the example of our president, Joe Biden. That seems like an interesting choice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, on the Judiciary Committee, Jamie Raskin supplanted Jerry Nadler, or will do once the new Congress is sworn in. Now, I can't remember off the top of my head what age Jamie Raskin is, but certainly it's a little bit of a stretch to consider him the more youthful choice. He's more youthful than Jerry Nadler, but he's not exactly, you know, he's in his 60s, so he's not exactly, you know, in the first flush of youth.
Indeed. All right, we've got more to come today on Rising. Please stay with us. President Joe Biden called for a congressional stock ban during a Tuesday interview with More Perfect Union. Imagine that. The interviewer praised Biden for not getting rich off stocks during his very long tenure in Congress. Here's Biden explaining his rationale for the ban.
But, you know, I don't know how you look your constituents in the eye and know because the job they gave you an inside track to make more money. I think we should be changing the law that we have to, but we abide by at the federal level, that nobody in the Congress should be able to make money in the stock market while they're in the Congress.
Former Speaker Nancy Pelosi has notoriously faced criticism for her husband's apparent success in trading stocks. Watchdog group Unusual Whales estimated in May that Pelosi and her husband Paul had made almost $4 million in 6 months off his NVIDIA call options.
As you may recall, Pelosi reportedly pressured Biden to drop out of the presidential race over the summer. 3 sources told Politico in August this move made Biden quite angry at Pelosi. Maybe this is revenge. Fox News' Jesse Waters hinted Tuesday that Biden might indeed be seeking vengeance. Here's that.
Biden didn't want to ban Congress from insider trading during his entire 50-year career in D.C. But a month before he leaves, he gives Nancy a little gift. This isn't about stopping corruption. It's about getting retribution.
A lot of people seem to be in agreement with Biden in terms of the ban, at least. Andrew Yang took to X and wrote, "A ban on stock trading by members of Congress is long overdue." Ilhan Omar also chimed in, writing, "We need a ban on stock trading by members of Congress. I am sure vast majority of our constituents would agree."
The Krasenstein brothers also joined in on the fun, with Brian Krasenstein writing, "Who doesn't agree with this? Why has it taken 46 presidents before one pushed heavily for this?" His brother Ed wrote, "Let's all unify around Biden's call for a congressional stock trading ban and Trump's aim to end daylight savings time." Ooh, I have a lot of thoughts on that. Let's remember to circle back to that. Start with the stock trading ban. I award Joe Biden no points for this, and may God have mercy on our souls. No, it's too late to do anything. So now, if he wanted to make this a priority, that had to happen earlier. So I see why people would say this is just revenge against Nancy Pelosi for how she treated him.
Yeah, it's rather late to rally to the popular and populist flag of banning stock options. There is no real good argument that I see to defend the buying and selling of stocks or other financial instruments by members of Congress. It automatically opens up people to the suspicion that they are trading off insider knowledge to some degree. Pelosi obviously is the most prominent example of it through her husband, but in general the whole system seems highly, highly dubious and open to corruption. So on the face of it, yes, a ban on that practice would be a good thing. On the other hand, if you are President of the United States and you decide to call for that ban when there are, 4 weeks of your term left, approximately?
Oh, yeah, they're going to get right on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be no, lame duck Congress called into session to do that. And it's also...
To take away their financial power?
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
I mean, it would be a hard sell anyway, because you have to get the very people affected by this who are
benefiting
enriched
from it.
by their knowledge, insider knowledge of what the rules and regulations are going to be, to agree that they should not be trading stocks.
Right.
And that's unfortunately not going to happen, although there are some members of Congress on a bipartisan basis who have in both the sort of progressive squad left and and then some of the kind of economic populist people on the right, like Josh Hawley has been a big proponent of this, which is great.
Sure, no, absolutely. I mean, there is a lot of bipartisan support to a degree. I mean, it is members who seem to be somewhat more to the left of the Democratic Party and to the populist right of the Republican Party. And a lot of people in the middle ground are quite happy to just stay quiet and hope it remains as it is. To the point about Biden, it is notable that back in 2021, Jen Psaki, who was then White House press secretary, not an MSNBC anchor, was asked about it, and she essentially said that it was the policy of the administration to let the leadership of Congress and congressional members decide what to do about it. So Biden very explicitly did not support this at a time when his political capital was higher and when there was potential to do more about it.
And Nancy Pelosi defended not doing it, defending allowing members of Congress to continue trading stocks on the grounds that we are a capitalist country and we like capitalism. Yeah. I like capitalism. We are a capitalist country. That's true. Having the people who say, and I want generally minimal regulation. You and I would certainly argue about the level of regulation in various fields, but the people making the regulations should be outside the system. That's like saying, the coach can't be the coach and a player. That doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. So it's not an argument against capitalism, but against people profiting from market transactions. It's saying the small number of people who are in charge of managing the regulations cannot themselves have a financial incentive to tweak them in favor of whatever company they have stock in. That should seem obvious and is not an attack whatsoever on capitalism. It in fact be a kind of crony corporatist regime where the people making the rules in some kind of Soviet structure are also the ones enriching themselves. Not capitalists, not what we capitalists want.
Right, and as I understand the principled right-wing or conservative position on this, it's that those kinds of that messiness screws up the operation of a free market, so it no longer actually becomes a free market. It becomes a market where powerful people have tilted it in their own interest.
All right, daylight savings time.
Yes.
I have a lot of strong
Tell me about
opinions
your
on
passions
this.
about daylight savings time.
I think I did a radar on this with Kim Iverson years and years and years ago. Our longtime fans can go look that one up. So Donald Trump recently tweeted in favor of abolishing daylight saving time. That's a good first step, but actually we don't want to abolish daylight savings time. We want to make permanent daylight savings time.
And why do we want to do that?
Because we don't want to switch the clocks. Doing that is stupid, and it's bad, and it makes people late for work, and makes people get in car crashes. It's just bad. It causes depression. Don't do it. We don't want to have to do that, so we just want to keep it year-round. I think would be better, we want more hours of sunlight after work. Isn't it depressing to be leaving work? You can be leaving work at 4:30 if you can get off at 4:30, and it's dark out already. Sure. This sucks. Okay. Don't like it, don't want it. So we want permanent daylight savings time, so that you end up with more hours of darkness in the morning, which people don't like. But it's the same. You gotta have the darkness sometime, and then we get more light in the evenings.
You're
I think
very
that would be better.
impassioned on this topic, Robbie.
I
You're
believe
a
in it
man
strongly.
full of surprises as to what
believe
draws
in
your
it
passion.
very strongly. The daylight savings time notoriously is for farmers, was
Yes.
lobbied for by farming. I think there's widespread agreement that it is stupid now to actually do the clock changing thing. But yes, I would just keep it so that you have more daylight when you finish your day. The argument against that, people will say, some people really don't like getting ready for school or for work in the darkness. My retort to that is getting ready for work is always a chore, because
regardless of the amount of light
I
that's
love
involved.
so much coming here to this wonderful job and interacting with you.
Darkness or light.
I jump out of bed every morning with
course.
vim and vigor, but it's not easy to do this anyway. The hours of the light is wasted on that period of the day. Let's have it more on the other side, so we can enjoy our evenings a bit more.
And you don't worry about disconnecting the nation from its agrarian roots by changing it in that way.
I do not.
Fair enough.
We are moving on to bigger, better things. So that would be my proposal, and it has some support from certain Republicans, including Marco Rubio, our incoming Secretary of State. So let's make it happen, team. Permanent daylight savings time, no changing the clocks, more light, less darkness. More to come on Rising. Stay tuned. Spy drones from China? That's what House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Michael McCaul claimed on Tuesday when speaking to reporters about the unidentified drones spotted flying above New Jersey and New York. McCaul is demanding answers from Biden officials. He said, quote, "I was with the NASA Administrator Bill Nelson. He said these drones have been reported over military sites. My judgment, based on my experience, is that those are over our military sites. Those that are over our military sites are adversarial and most likely coming from the People's Republic of China." McCaul said that the House Intelligence Committee is gearing up to have a hearing on this matter. On Tuesday, lawmakers in the House Intelligence Committee got a classified briefing from federal officials about the various drone sightings on the East Coast.
McCall's claims come after Biden administration officials insisted many of the aircraft are commercial. Speaking to Fox News Tuesday, independent journalist Michael Schellenberger challenged the federal government's inconsistent explanations. Let's watch.
Last week, you had both DoD spokesperson John Kirby and Mayorkas, the head of DHS, insist emphatically that there had been no drone flyovers over U.S. military bases. Well, that night, actually on Friday night and then Saturday morning, there was a flyover of the Wright-Patterson Air Base in Ohio. And in fact, it's been widely reported. So it's curious why they said that. Yesterday, then Kirby came out and said, well, of course, we all know that there had been these drone flyovers. Are we to be led to believe that they examined 5,000 cases? 5,000, it's actually 6,000 according to FBI, but 6,000 people were interviewed, asked where they were, what direction they were pointed in. It just strains credulity for them to say these things. It really undermines the trust, and that's why you see conspiracy theories emerging into the vacuum.
Republican Congressman from New Jersey, Jeff Van Drew, posted on X, quote, "First, a Chinese spy balloon drifted across U.S. airspace for a week. Now unidentified drones are flying over New Jersey, avoiding radar detection. Gaps in our airspace are being exploited, and because of it, the safety of Americans is at risk." Conservative commentator Nick Sortor wrote, quote, "Mystery drones in New Jersey are Chinese spy drones, according to House Foreign Affairs Committee Chair McCaul. You've got to be kidding me. What the hell is Biden waiting for? Shoot them down if they can't be identified." Former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker posted on X, quote, "Why should we believe the Biden administration about the drones when they didn't know about a spy balloon from China and did nothing to stop it? The number one job of the government is to keep us safe from our enemies. January 20th can't come fast enough."
Meanwhile, New York Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer just introduced drone legislation that would authorize state and local authorities to conduct drone surveillance and help them coordinate with federal officials. Local officials right now don't have the authority or money to track mysterious drones plaguing New Jersey and other areas.
Yes, so people who were in this briefing, who got this intelligence briefing, had a wide range of reactions to it. I saw reactions, yes, that it's China, reactions that these are actually federal government devices, reactions that we have no idea what it is. Everybody's all over the place here. So I agree we should not take the Biden administration at their word, and they're being very evasive here explaining what these things are. I think the most likely reason for that, and I think you agree, as we've discussed many times, is that these are in fact federal devices. The government knows exactly what they are. They are ours. Some of them are just planes and people misidentifying things. That clearly does not explain everything people are saying. And the tendency to blame it on some kind of foreign externality is, I would caution Republicans against doing that, because that is actually providing cover for the Biden administration. You're like, why aren't they shooting Chinese or Iranian motherships out of the sky? It's because they know they're not. They know it's our things.
There's certainly, I think, the balance of probabilities is that they are our things, because I don't see why the Biden administration or any administration would be so relatively relaxed about a situation like this if there was even a question that it was an adversarial power sending these drones over. Congressman Van Drew was the one who talked about the idea that there was an Iranian mothership somehow off New Jersey somewhere sending these drones around, and then the Pentagon came out and said, no, that is not the case, and there is not any Iranian ship in that locality. Michael McCaul, I would say broadly a more credible voice, perhaps. I don't know exactly why he has concluded what he has concluded. I mean, it's obviously based on that briefing, which, as you say, gets divergent responses. It just seems that this is the second time after the other instance that was referred in our introduction there with the Chinese spy balloon and all of that, where these things have become a huge national story, and the explanation offered has not been particularly effective any time, and so it obviously feeds public suspicion.
And is this a problem that our elected representatives, or not even, our elected representatives seen just as in the dark as us, which is a little worrisome. The people whom we have actual control over in the democratic process are totally in the dark, and this background level of officials, what Republicans derisively refer to as the deep state, these permanent administrators who are conducting these things or have much greater knowledge and insight, just continue to lie to us or mislead us about what the things actually are. I don't know. That's not always a comforting thought. I understand that sometimes there are going to be state secrets that need to be kept, the locations of our spies in foreign countries, their identities, right? That's not something we want leaked to the press or whistleblowers to come forward on that. We want whistleblowers to come forward when there's unethical or illegal conduct going on. But some things, fine, got to get kept secret. But the more things are kept secret, the easier it is for then the political elected figures who are he seemed just as misinformed as anyone else, to make wildly speculative claims about foreign threats that then gin up the attitude, the willingness to do more civil liberties violations and pass more military spending and do all those sorts of things and have a more militaristic posture toward the rest of the world that actually the American people often have an impulse against, but because they're just saying things that are false, they're ginning us up in that direction.
Yeah, and the communications strategy here has been very, very questionable, because one would think, and we have spoken about this before, even if there were a need to keep some of this private or secret, the clarity and consistency of the explanation could still be provided. In other words, you could still provide accurate information that you don't then tweak and change and make U-turns around, while perhaps preserving some element of secrecy around exactly what is going on. But the fact that the explanations keep changing without any apparently good reason or any external factor, it's not that they've changed their mind, they've just changed their story. And I think that, of course, feeds public skepticism.
Yeah, it's feeding tremendous public skepticism and fear and reckless actions that are going to be taken by some members of the public, pointing lasers at planes in the sky, or trying to shoot down one of these things, which if these things have some heft to them, they crash, they could injure someone. Absolutely. So providing an explanation, a real explanation, the truth, not just any explanation, sooner rather than later would, I think, be a good thing. Stay tuned, more Rising right after.
Is Disney shifting to the right? A division of Walt Disney Studios, Pixar, pulled a transgender storyline in its upcoming animated series Win or Lose. The series follows a co-ed softball team as they gear up for the championship game. Each episode features a different character. As first reported in The Hollywood Reporter, the transgender character has not been written out, but a short dialogue touching on her gender has been axed.
The change follows years of criticism Disney received for including LGBTQ characters and storylines or pulling them off badly. Moreover, Disney's former chief executive Bob Chapek drew the ire of liberals in 2022 for refusing to speak out loudly against Florida's legislation described by liberals as being anti-gay. Disney's new chief, Robert Iger, broke with his predecessor and said some of the company's content had, in fact, become too political. He ordered a review of projects in the works. Editor-in-chief of the Post-Millennials, Libby Emmons, posted, quote, "Another win for the good guys." Florida's Voice host Drew Steele reacted thusly.
Disney has just removed a transgender storyline from its upcoming Pixar series called Win or Lose. They cited respect for parents as the reason. Huh. Okay. According to The Hollywood Reporter, here is the quote from Disney. Quote, "When it comes to animated content for a younger audience, we recognize that many parents would prefer to discuss certain subjects with their children on their own terms."
Well, look, I think it is definitely clear that Disney, like other entertainment companies, is responding to a changing political environment, or maybe just a recognition that the political environment was never exactly what they thought it was, in terms of going in a very culturally progressive direction in terms of the content. I think they have lost some viewers, supporters, etc., for being perceived as so tied to whatever we're calling it, wokeness, cultural progressivism, social liberalism, and are trying to frantically retool to get rid of that perception. Do I personally care if there's a transgender character in whatever Pixar show? Of course not. And in fact, I do think it's good to have characters from different backgrounds and perspectives, but the problem is it's often done in a very ham-fisted or lazy way where the character's identity is the whole thing about them, and they like there's no it's very skin deep and it feels very fake. Honestly, I think that's what people object to more than what the existence of LGBTQ, like, who obviously exist in real life. So some of these characters would check off those boxes, but it's like when that's their entire personality, and it's like it feels like it's an agenda. It feels like we're putting this in here to make some social statement, and we want you to love this person or this character for just this attribute. I think that's what turns some people off.
I think there are two separate points there. I mean, I think that good drama and good art is rarely propagandistic, right?
Yes.
It is mostly about nuance and complexity
100%.
and the shades of grey in human experience. So I take that point. I think I am more on edge about this decision on Disney's. Not that I think it's going to bring, the world crashing to a halt, but I would argue, I think, that popular culture in general has helped more tolerant attitudes or more broader acceptance over many, many years. I mean, I was just thinking about this morning because I knew we were discussing this. In the 1960s, the Peanuts comic strip introduced Franklin, who was the first black character in that comic strip, and it was a big thing, and there were papers in the South that didn't want to run the comic strip and all of that. Things like that are all the way up to in TV aimed at adults. People did think Ellen DeGeneres was going to end her career by coming out at the time that she did that. People can have whatever view they have of her, but that was, I think, a cultural moment. And so when it gets into the realm of corporations striking out storylines for fear of making people uncomfortable, I would argue actually that art of any kind has often makes people uncomfortable, and that's no bad thing. And whether that is an animated series aimed toward children or something that is aimed at adults, I think that discomfort is not something that we should run away from.
Yeah, I don't think so either. It just has to be done well. The criticism of Disney now and what they've done with like Star Wars, for instance, the criticism coming from conservatives, best realized in that hilarious South Park episode, which I cannot repeat many of the lines for, mocking Kathleen Kennedy's tenure in charge of Star Wars. The criticism being that the idea for all these kinds of progressive executives in charge of these narrative storylines is, let's bring in a sassy female character who maybe is a minority or maybe is gay and have them just be better at everything than everyone else and have them have no depth to them except that they're gay or black or a woman. And that is very grating and is not a good idea.
No, there is,
It's
and there is criticism.
We want to avoid.
To be fair, there is criticism also of that kind of thing from the left. There's a phrase that I hope I can use that is used critically by black activists of the magical Negro, which is the idea that you introduce a character who is black and imparts these sort of oracular pearls of wisdom, and then the white person realizes the error of his or her ways and pays tribute to the wisdom. And it's the basic argument.
Do you remember the manic pixie dream girl trope from films from like the aughts of the Natalie Portman character from Garden State is a good example. Several of those who like cause the main character to have some revelation about themselves, and they're really quirky in a way that no one real is in real life, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do get
it's just lazy writing. It can be apart from any ideological. It's just lazy, and just have more interesting, well-rounded characters who have attributes who can check these boxes, but have something compelling about them.
Well, and the danger in the lazy writing, as the example that I was talking about, is it is patronizing to the group that often white liberal people are in a rather paternalistic sense, thinking that they're trying to help.
I always think of a great example of this. I'm a big fan of, our viewers know I'm a huge nerd type person. I love the cartoon show Avatar: The Last Airbender on Nickelodeon, which has a very powerful character who is blind, but who has, they all have magic powers to move water and earth and fire. She's an earthbender, and she's blind, but she, like the moles who crawl through the ground, like she can sense the vibrations. But she's not, like, she's really good at what she does, but she's not good at everything because she is blind. When they go flying through the air, she jokes about how she can't see anything. She has no idea where they're flying, and it's real and human and well done, and she has advantages and disadvantages. And often these kinds of supposed to be making a woke point characters have no flaws, because they think if they had flaws, you'd be saying being gay is a flaw or being black is a flaw or something like that, when it's just not. That is not well done.
No, we don't want one-dimensional characters, whatever the drama or whatever the purported purpose is. I mean, I think that any kind of TV, movies, or whatever, where where it's just presented as a parable rather than an actual human story, I've limited time for.
Indeed. That was a fun discussion. Tell us what you think in the comments. Stay tuned. More Rising right after this.
Congress has avoided yet again another government shutdown. What a relief to us all. Congressional leaders struck a last-minute spending deal, something that has never happened before, except the 500 times it has happened, Tuesday, that will fund the government through March 14th next year. The 1,500-page package this time around includes roughly $100 billion in disaster relief, with aid for communities damaged by hurricanes Milton and Helene. Also, $10 billion in economic assistance for farmers, as well as provisions focused on renewing expiring healthcare programs. It also includes provisions that restrict U.S. investments in China.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, whose leadership could be in jeopardy over the bipartisan deal, defended the bill on Fox News Wednesday morning. Let's watch.
We decided, even though we don't normally like short-term stopgap funding measures, it made sense here. Instead of doing, Chuck Schumer and Biden's spending for 2025, we pushed this decision into March. It'll be March 14th. So the feature there is that we'll have Republican-controlled Congress and Trump back in the White House, and we get to decide spending for 2025. So that was a good thing.
Incoming chief of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, Elon Musk, did not hide his disdain for this legislation. He took to X and wrote, quote, "Ever seen a bigger piece of pork?" And he was not alone in that verdict. Lots of despairing from limited government conservative members of the Republican coalition, upset that this happened. Of course, this has happened, as you noted, a gazillion times. This is how the funding for the government now is just ritualistically approved, with short gap funding continuation type stuff that continues all this ugly stuff that Republicans ostensibly want to get rid of, but never seem to manage to do so. I suppose you can defend it alongside the lines that the House Speaker just did, that why would we, go out on a limb right now when a few weeks from now we'll control all of the government, so we might as well just wait till then. I guess that's fine, but the day will come when Republicans have to either admit they're not going to carry it through on this promise to actually cut the government, or they need to actually cut the government.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's such a pantomime, this stuff. I think that's why it's so frustrating to so many people. I mean, fair play to our colleagues who report on the goings-on on Capitol Hill, and every period of time have to go through this ritual of like, oh, is the government going to shut down? Are the wheels going to drop off? Is this the apocalypse? And then there's a last-minute spending deal, and it's typically one that basically keeps spending at the same levels. There's a little bit of tinkering around the edges, and the play goes on regardless. You know, I have to be honest, even though it's my job, I find it extraordinarily difficult to get like excited about the minutiae of this stuff. As soon as somebody mentions...
You and me both, brother.
As soon as somebody mentions continuing resolution, I can feel my eyes glaze over. But, you know, I'm sure there will be criticism from more fiscally conservative Republicans. The argument against that fiscal conservatism is, well, if the government shuts down, we get the blame for it, people lose vital services, etc. I'm sure there are lots of things to get excited about if that's your bag, but it's not mine.
Yeah, the government shutting down is not an exciting thing to happen, even for people of my ideological bent, because eventually they do approve the funding for it, right, and it's always going backwards. So even if you have employees or federal employees who get like they get a paid vacation, because they end up always getting back pay. So it's not like, oh, this is how we're closing down the government. They end up getting paid for it anyway. So it's just them getting paid and not doing work. So we don't actually want that to happen. We want thoughtful, significant cuts to government, but just having it all shut down and only to restart maybe a few weeks later and have all those people paid anyway isn't saving us anything. It's just creating headaches.
And people who know more about the mechanics of this than I do say that even if there is a shutdown averted, the preparations for a shutdown are costly in and of themselves. There have to be contingency plans drawn up. There has to be all sorts of work put into the possibility of a shutdown, even if one is averted at the last moment. So, not that I'm so excited about fiscal conservatism as you are, Robby, but in terms of wastage of money, that is obviously part of the equation as well.
Yeah, that's not what we want to happen. Not the right way to do it. So, good to have the government not shut down, but if Speaker Johnson is making this promise here, okay, fine, one more chance, and then if he doesn't deliver this time, his leadership really should be in jeopardy. Get a House Speaker. I mean, why did they even bother? I know this is the sentiment now that many Republicans feel, truly conservative, Trump-leaning ones. Why did we waste all this effort to switch McCarthy with someone else, only to get the exact same policies, approval for all sorts of spending projects that more Trump-leaning Republicans don't want to approve and ran against? So he'll have one more chance after this to actually achieve the things that the Republican coalition promised their supporters they were going to do, and if he doesn't, he should be tossed. And I think
that's the view that I think people like Chip Roy have,
yes,
the congressman from Texas, who, you know, to be fair to him, I think sincerely believes in the positions that he puts forward, which is one of the reasons that I think marks him out in Congress so much, because he actually genuinely believes that he's not somebody who can be easily bought off. Yeah. And so that's why there is that objection. I mean, it seems to me, looking at the politics of it, that one reason people like Johnson are so reluctant to drive that hard a line is the likelihood is it may not be able to pass in that sort of form. And then you do have a government shutdown, and Republicans typically get blamed for it because they have that internal struggle between the more hardline or hawkish fiscal conservatives and people who are more like, oh, well, we'll just keep the system running and rolling along. And so it is typically, I think, a tactic that has damaged Republicans or caused more internal strife for Republicans than it has for Democrats.
Yes, indeed. Stay with us. More Rising right after this.
So, Robby, you will never guess who has recommendations for how cable channel MSNBC can recover from its current troubles. Keith Olbermann, a one-time marquee name for the left-leaning cable network, abruptly left almost a decade ago. Now he's written a scathing piece in Variety stating that Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough, quote, went on their show and welcomed our new insect overlords. Remember, the audience for Morning Joe went down rapidly after the duo went to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring of President-elect Donald Trump. Let's watch their explanation.
And for those asking why we would go speak to the president-elect during such fraught times, especially between us, I guess I would ask back, why wouldn't we? Joe and I realized it's time to do something different. And that starts with not only talking about Donald Trump, but also talking with him.
So here's what Oberman recommends. Quote, I mean, obviously you have to fire Mr. and Mrs. Scared Bro. That said, he said a show like theirs should continue. At the time that Oberman left MSNBC, he had the highest rated program on the network, and he was reportedly paid $7 million annually.
Oh boy. Well, if everybody started taking Keith Olbermann's advice, I would not have a job. He's called on the Hill to fire me.
Oh, has he? What was your offense to Keith?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I think not, offering enough
Praise of
prayers
Keith
for Dr. Fauci. I think I got
okay.
myself in COVID jail, COVID prison, sent to the COVID gulag for questioning my betters. Yes, he is no fan of mine, and I am no fan of his. What a hysterical... I mean that in both ways. I find him hysterical. He makes me laugh, and he is possessed of madness and hysteria in terms of the commentary he used to do. Those were the days, though, just watching him freak out about every little thing. I mean, often things I also thought were stupid that the Bush administration was doing, but just getting worked up into an absolute fervor over it. Then Donald Trump happens, and all of his histrionics about Bush are now inadequate to him because this is someone that he views as even worse. And he just seems not well. And has he left? I think he quit Twitter for the 1,000th time to go to Blue Sky, the kinder, gentler site where my friend Jesse Single gets like death threats every day. I'm going to be doing a monologue on that soon. So stay if you're interested in what's happening on Blue Sky. I'm going to be taking a close look there to come. But Keith Olbermann saying things.
I say as he does tend to do. I don't know if this is still available in the mists of internet history, but before I wrote for The Hill, I wrote a piece for Salon, which of course was editorially fairly in line with Keith Olbermann's views, excoriating him. He was still on the air at the time.
Oh.
Because what I was trying to separate out was the idea of genuine liberal influenced journalism from just hysteria and hyperbole and his propensity to bring on guests onto a show who only ever told him how right he was about everything, which was his modus operandi. I noticed that this piece that he has written is one of his recommendations is that MSNBC should bring him back, or should at least consider doing so, be reunited with their prodigal anchor, as he refers to himself. He also has a very peculiar detail in this piece. He is talking about how when he had his show Countdown, he essentially helped the network's fortunes immensely, and he talks about the people he brought on, including Chris Hayes, Rachel Maddow, etc. And at one point he claims that he stopped Rachel Maddow from jumping to CNN by giving her $437 out of his own pocket, which is a claim that I would like to know more about, and I would like to know what Rachel Maddow has to say about it. It is also a quite curious sum of money to list, and so I'm not sure where he's going with that. His argument, if we strip it from its sort of Obermann-isms, his argument seems to be a combination that he says that primetime audiences for MSNBC, and I guess for cable news generally, want comfort food. So he seems to be suggesting that they should double down on a very liberal, very progressive programming, and that any pursuit of people who are more centrist or certainly centre-right is pointless. You could argue that in the cable news environment, we were talking about it earlier this week, how it is a shrinking audience for cable news overall, and there is a genuine business dilemma in mercenary terms about, do you just play to your base or do you try to expand beyond that?
The view is not necessarily wrong, because playing to giving catnip to viewers who are hysterically freaked out about Trump in an Olbermann mode is what MSNBC knows how to do well. What they don't know how to do well is cater to independent thinkers, conservatives, even like populists on the left, people who are watching maybe our show, who are getting their news from internet, from content creators, from social media. They don't know how to bring in those people. So even though it would be a good business plan to move in that direction, they're probably just not staffed by executives who understand that whatsoever, and maybe shouldn't even try.
I mean, I'm not one to leap to the defense of MSNBC, because I did like it much more years ago when I thought it had more legitimate news from a liberal perspective. And I think that cable networks generally have moved in a more propagandistic direction. There are people at MSNBC who I do have regard for in terms of an individual basis. I think there are certain anchors that Eamon Mohadeen, I think, has done great work on the Middle East. I think people like Katie Tour are legitimate journalists, but they notably seem to get more criticism now from the MSNBC audience than more, I would say, propagandistic journalists. I also think it is not a problem confined to MSNBC in terms of playing to the base or offering red meat. Fox has been more successful at it, but dissenting voices on Fox, I think, are in very, very short supply, increasingly so compared to when you had like Hannity and Combs, for example. That just model doesn't really exist anymore.
I also don't think getting rid of Joe and Mika would ultimately benefit them at all. I think it would hurt them. They've damaged their brand with some of their core audience by doing this, Trump apology tour. I don't know that was a good idea, but also I don't think getting rid of them would improve the situation.
Well,
or maybe it would be fine. Some networks discover that swapping people out, you make the audience mad for a little while, and then they adjust to a new person.
I mean, I think it's often true that the network is often bigger than any individual stars. I mean, we see people who've been primetime cable stars go off and do their own thing, and the networks typically are just fine without them. As you know, I'm pretty critical of the Mika and Joe thing, just because I thought the speed of the flip made them seem fraudulent. It's not that I think there's anything wrong with appealing to the centre or having a more affable or civil tone. I just think you can't warn about the incipient rise of fascism for several years, and then when the purportedly incipient fascist person wins, pay homage to him by going to his Florida estate.
Should I do our outro in the style of Keith Olbermann?
Please.
The worst person in the world will be revealed soon. It's you for electing fascists to take over in our streets. They're coming for us. I hear them knocking at the door right now. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any of our content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, too bad for that, because the Nazis have won and it is all over and will be shut down as we speak. Good luck to you. Godspeed.